The most powerful discoveries in the history of science, my engineering colleagues will agree, have arisen through the study of phenomena using man-made devices, not simply by studying nature. For example, we learned a lot about heat and pressure vaporization from the steam engine, not just by studying the theory of thermodynamics as it occurred in nature. We controlled nature a little bit. That's where the powerful discoveries come from in science. Now, you've heard from Professor Lanneman about Maxwell's equations, or Maxwell's treatise on electricity and magnetism. That allowed us to know a great deal about how wireless wave propagation actually occurs. However, it was a long time after the publication of Maxwell's treatise before we could restate it and see its impact. And that impact is probably best described by talking a little bit about Claude Shannon's information theory and the important paper Shannon wrote in 1948. Consider a message source, such as a writer or a speaker like myself, who may on occasion produce a message. The message I could be sending you could be one of many possible messages. The amount of information conveyed by the message increases as the amount of uncertainty as to what the message actually will be becomes greater. That's the key in Claude Shannon's information theory. A particular message, let's say, is 1 out of 10 possible messages that I could send you. You don't know which one of those 10 I'm going to send you. 1 out of 10 covers a smaller amount of information in a message than if it's 1 out of 1,000,000 possible messages. Context is important. That's what we'll be talking about when we talk about the entropy of information. The entropy of information is a measurement. The greater the amount of information conveyed and the more we know about the message source, the less the uncertainty and the less the entropy and the greater the information. Information theory has its origins in electrical engineering. The important ideas of communication theory go to the very beginnings of electrical communication. During a transatlantic voyage in 1832, it was Samuel F.B. Morse, that's the Morse of Morse code, who set about working on an electric telegraph. That was sending messages through wires with electrical signals. The original design was actually a lot more complicated than what we know of as telegraphy. Morse code originally involved drawing long and short lines on strips of paper, and the sequences repeated not letters like the letter B or the letter C, but numbers. And the numbers were assigned to particular words. So you made a message up of words, and the words were represented by numbers, and the numbers were represented by long and short lines on a strip of paper. These were transmitted over the wire by long and short electrical pulses. The system was very clumsy. Later, Morse got together with a fellow by the name of Alfred Vail, and they came up with Morse code as we know it today. Morse code is simply long and short electrical pulses, or electromagnetic wave transmissions, with spaces in between. The spaces in between are important. They can either be short spaces or long spaces. Short spaces indicate that we're still working on part of a word. Longer spaces indicate that we've finished a particular word, we're starting a new word. Long and short letters, in terms of the time it took to transmit them, were designed by examining the number of types in a printer's box. You'll notice here that not all of the rectangles in the printer's box are the same size. Some letters were used more often than others. Hence, the rectangles are larger, and some letters were used very rarely. Their rectangles are quite small. The very small boxes, those were the letters that were used very rarely, like the letter X or the letter Q. But the largest box you see was probably the letter E, which is the most commonly used letter in the English language. Morse and Vail looked at printers' boxes, and they came up with the idea that Morse code should have long and short pulses, and letters should be arranged in such a way that there would be an economy of transmission. With the dots and dashes, it's possible to send English text faster by telegraph than most people can type. The most used letter E in Morse code is just a short pulse, DIT. Claude Shannon's theory, that we'll talk about soon, tells us that Morse and Vail did a very good job indeed. Today, we would only increase the information we send using modern theory by about 15% over what Morse did more than a century ago. The lesson provided by Morse code is very simple. It matters a great deal how one translates a message into electrical signals, and thus into electromagnetic waves. This is the very heart of the economics of communication theory.